Welcome to the Daily TV Mass 40 Days of Lent online retreat. Day 37. The Sorrowful Mysteries of the Rosary with Spirit and Father Obinna Ifeanyi. Part 1. The Agony in the Garden. The Scourging at the Pillar. The Crowning with Thorns. The first sorrowful mystery, the agony in the garden.
He took with him Peter and James and John, and began to be distressed and agitated. He said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake." And going on a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, "Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want."
The meaning of words can change over time. One example is the word agony. Today, agony means sufferings of all kinds, physical and mental. Before the 17th century, it meant something quite different. Agony was used to describe a place of contest, a place of battle, which originates from the Greek word agon. In Latin, the word for agony is agora, which refers to a marketplace or public square. Therefore, the first sorrowful mystery, the agony of Jesus in the garden, ties together three ideas. First, agony as a place of contest. Jesus' struggle reminds us that life is a battleground between the forces of good and evil. Jesus' love for humanity was repaid with betrayal, abandonment, rejection, and ingratitude. At the same time, Jesus' conversation with the Father calls our attention to the stamina, the energy we need for life's journey, which comes to us through prayer. Second, agony as a public square. Observing Jesus in the garden is a reminder that the Christian life is a public witness to Christian values and virtues exemplified in the life of Jesus. Sometimes these values may be in total conflict with the morals of our society. Third, agony as suffering. The pain and anguish of Jesus in the garden reveal the salvific necessity of suffering. Here, suffering implies the training required for a competition or a contest. The Mount of Olives is Jesus' training ground before the contest ahead of him, which is his passion and death. Suffering is a part of human existence, and we often have our share of suffering in our lives, big or small. As we join Jesus in the garden, we witness that it is okay to ask God to take our sufferings away. But in doing so, we must leave the window of God's will always open. The first sorrowful mystery challenges us to ask these questions. How prepared are we for the battle of life? How often do we accept the will of God, even if it is contrary to our own desires? And like the apostles, are we willing to accompany our friends on their journeys? And do you fall asleep at the crucial moments of that journey?
The second sorrowful mystery, the Scourging at the Pillar.
Pilate spoke to them again. "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him!" Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him!" So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. And after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified.
In our world, The idea of human dignity is precious. Pope St. John Paul II taught us that there is no dignity when the human dimension is eliminated from the person. Also, John Paul II reminds us that our dignity is not rooted in our temporal existence, but in where we come from and where we are called to go. In the second sorrowful mystery, Jesus, the humble, innocent, and voiceless Son of God, reminds us of the prophet Jeremiah, who was also unjustly beaten and imprisoned in the Old Testament. When Jesus is scourged at the pillar, he experienced the elimination of his human dimension. Jesus was cruelly and dishonorably tied to a stake, beaten, spat upon, mocked, and ridiculed. It was a barbaric act intended to humiliate him, but for the sake of our redemption, he did not defend himself or reach out in anger at his torturers. Instead, Jesus humbled himself to share in our suffering and to share in our humanity. Catholic social teaching calls on each of us to protect the most vulnerable, to stand in solidarity with others, and to protect the rights and dignity of all people. We are also called to stand with those who suffer modern-day versions of scourging in the forms of abuse, unjust punishment, humiliation, fear, and those who are voiceless.
The third sorrowful mystery, the crowning with thorns.
And the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and striking him on the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no case against him." So Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man."
Pilate's exclamation, "Behold the man," pointing to the flogged and beaten Jesus, is the climax of John's presentation of Christ's humanness. Jesus is truly the Word made flesh. The third sorrowful mystery speaks to Jesus' identity as he goes into battle. Jesus went into the fight that was his passion as a king, which is symbolized by the crowning with thorns. In ancient times, a leader joined his army in battle. Unlike today, where they often sit miles away in their heavily guarded headquarters. The crown worn on Jesus' head symbolizes his victory in the battle, even though it was intended as mockery by his executioners. Jesus wearing a crown and dressed in purple is a sign of an earthly king whose duty was to suffer to protect his people. Jesus standing next to Pilate, in full view of the assembly of people, speaks to how the moral ground is shifting beneath Pilate's feet. Jesus shows all of us that the one they call king, and who was crowned with thorns and dressed in purple, is there to suffer for the people. Truly, Jesus is the King of the Jews and King of the world. Pope Francis reminds us that a true leader is a shepherd living with the smell of the sheep. This is the challenge for each of us in our various roles of leading and shepherding others. So, whether at home, at work, in our parish, in the community, or as a politician, we must constantly ask ourselves, how do we remain close to and in defense of those we shepherd?
Join us tomorrow for day 38, Carrying of the Cross, the crucifixion and death of Jesus,